We are live now. Very good evening,
Okay.
Sujata.
Very good evening.
Thanks a lot for taking my invitation. I just want to take just 1 minute to introduce myself. So anything that people want to know about me, lifebuoyant.com website will tell more about me. But I'm somebody who right now has spent more than 29 years of professional experience, both in IT as well as non-IT. So that's me. I'm married. I have a son who's just turned 18. I also live with my father, who's on the other side of 80. So that's my family. My wife, she's a homemaker. So right now we have we looks like we have a guest who is watching us right now. Just want to make sure that there's a sanity check that we are fine. Sujata, I will also introduce you very quickly so that. So I just want to go through a quick sanity check. Yeah, it is still showing. Actually, it is actually on. It's on because I see two people. Very good evening to whoever is watching us right now. We will do this live with Sujata. Sujata is a couples therapist as well as a relationship coach. So Sujata has counseled more than 14,000 couples. Am I right, Sujata?
It's 14,000 all inclusive. Individuals, couples, families, groups, organizations.
Okay, 14,000
all together.
14,000 people. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Sujata, you are a NIMHANS trained psychotherapist. Right? So you're an NIMHANS trained person as well as you do a bunch of things. You have a developmental approach towards involving people actually. So I think you're an author as well. So I want to quickly show, is that the book? Can you talk about that a bit?
Sure. So this book came out last year in the Kindle version in June of 2019. And the paperback version came out in September 2019. As the title says, this is a book about falling in love and dealing with that experience in the absence of the person with whom you have fallen in love.
Okay.
So usually when we fall in love, the energy that is evoked in us, that usually starts going outwards in trying to get hold of that person, to have more time with the person, to experience togetherness, to spend the rest of your life with them. These are our classic, typical hopes and dreams and expectations when we think that we have fallen in love. But what I experienced was, because this was not possible, I was wondering what happens then in the absence of that possibility for the normal expected fulfillment of this. So when that energy goes inwards, and when you experience the highs and the lows of the love and the longing, then what happens is what is captured in the book in the form of poetry, actually. So I used to write poems that I would just keep posting on Facebook. When I used to write, I never had the imagination or the plan that this would come out as a book. In my friends list, there was the editor of the media house which has published this, who used to follow them, like them, and keep saying that they are very intense, they're very deep, they remind him of Rumi, and that this must be published. So he persuaded me for a good 2.5, 3 years. And then I thought, okay, maybe I should look at that. So that was another whole journey about what happens when you want to publish a book, which I'm sure you can relate to, because you have your
because
own.
I myself went through a publishing journey.
Yes.
I'm not so much of a poet like you. I'm more of at most a one or two liner guy. I'm somebody who can come up with packed 1 or 2 liners actually.
Yes.
With rhyme and mostly with a reason.
Yes.
Mostly with the right reason. I rhyme with reason.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
But I just want to talk about It's about wills. It's actually a transitions book about life and career transitions. The reason I wrote about that, and I'm very, I'm no psychotherapist, I'm not a psychologist and all that. I'm just a computer science engineer who passed out nearly 30 years ago, 29 years ago. So I'm a person who actually good with coding. I code stuff. Actually. I write programming, right? But over a period of time, understand like maybe you're also programming yourself, right? I mean, that's what there's a lot of stuff that goes around NLP and all that. But anyway, I have made sense of some of it actually. But a quick point is, I was a techie. I used to be a process guy, process come management guy, which actually gives big picture view. As well as just to balance my own life and career, I got into training and development L&D field since 2005 actually. Ever since 2005, initially as a process coach and all that process methodology with respect to software engineering, but that like morphed little by little because I have found blogging as one tool where I could express myself and get some feedback. So that was my connect with people because I was very rough around the edges with oral communication skills. So, but written was ahead of me. So anyway, so that's how I made through multiple transitions, and I see that life and career is happening at the same time. So it's my effort to put people in the mode about life and career transition and how to navigate through that and something like that. Yeah.
Right.
So first and foremost, Sujata, but I want to clarify, it's not about my first book. Actually, the second book I wanted to, which I'm trying to author right now, Unlearning and Relearning and Relearning COVID Times. That's what I'm interested in actually. So I'm talking to different people with different expertise. So you are the person with expertise with respect to couples, right? Relationships particularly. So I want to explore that bit actually. So one thing I can relate to is like from a man's perspective, you're a mama's boy actually till you get married. And then, of course, for me actually 3 powerful women in my life. One is mother. Second one is my sister. She's older than me and the leader of the house. And then, of course, the third, but then the most powerful person enters into your life. So that there's a lot of unlearning, relearning that happens, but that's my perspective. Can you throw light into what really, most men or most women go through when they're getting into relationships?
Okay, so let me put it slightly differently. The experience of the men being mama's boys partly is specific to Eastern cultures, especially India, but there's a larger global overarching dynamic that goes on which creates this kind of situation where if you've noticed carefully, men who have a comfortable and consistent and a connected relationship with their mothers actually tend to have fulfilling relationships with their wives as well.
Okay.
There is a quote, that says, if a man treats you like a princess, be sure that he has been raised by a queen.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That's a great. Want to quickly acknowledge Anil Grover, really honored that you are in the live with us today, as well as Sunita Lawrence. These are the 2 people whom I can right now acknowledge. They are in the live with us. Thanks so much for showing up. It really makes us, very glad. Yeah.
Yes. So what this means is, what does this mean? It means that the child has learned to relate to the female gender through the first model, the first example of female in the world as they enter and as they grow, which is the mother. So when that aspect is clean and clear and well developed and healthy, men tend to have healthy relationships with women in general, and also especially with their wife, because the idea of intimacy, which includes both showing your strong sides as well as revealing your weak sides with courage and with comfort. If you have had nurturant mothering experiences, you tend to have that inbuilt in you to bring it to an intimate relationship as well. So now the converse of this is also true. If a man has had a very troubled relationship with his mother, or as is often the case, no relationship with his mother, beyond a perfunctory transactional namaste and thank you kind of thing, then he will have tremendous difficulty in having an intimate relationship with his wife. Now, let me also clarify, by intimate, I'm not referring to sexuality alone. I'm talking about an overall sense of deep connectedness with the partner. So he will have tremendous difficulty there. Now comes the other angle, which is, never in the history of marriage and relationship have we demanded more from this institution as we are now in the last 20 years as far as India is concerned, and perhaps 50 years as far as the rest of the world is concerned. Meaning, we are expecting the marital partner to fulfill needs which an entire community used to fulfill previously. So the whole onus falls either on the man or the woman to do that. Yeah. Now, if a woman, and then we have the women's empowerment movement that has been happening, which is led by women seeking more closeness and more intimacy in the marriage. Women not being happy just with things being provided, or you being, or the wife being protected, or having a certain social position as being married. They're seeking something more. And women are woefully unequipped to deal with that, because as a culture, we do not have that experience in a majority of men. So you have opened Pandora's box with this opener. But yeah, it is a very, very deep topic. I have a lot to say on it, maybe on another
Okay,
topic.
but you made me immensely happy, because I nurtured a very strong bondage with my mother. In fact, my COVID moment, my personal COVID moment was between 2000 to 2010. When my mother deteriorated because of arthritis, and she went through bilateral TKR. She got wheelchaired for 10 years actually. Yeah. So my personal COVID moment is what forced me to look for a 9 to 6 kind of jobs, which my curriculum did not pay for. My computer said that no, I can just write code just like a robo. I was like that actually.
Yeah. So I think you are fortunate to be able to recognize that and say that you have a close bond with your mother. There are many, when we talk about male and female gender, and when we talk about masculine and feminine qualities, let me ask you here itself. So to give me 3 masculine qualities.
You're asking me about me, or you're generally asking?
No, generally.
Masculine, sudden brawn in the sense strength, physical strength, definitely one quality.
Strength.
Courage to face. Courage in the sense to provide for the family.
Yes.
Okay, courage to do whatever it takes to provide for the family. That is.
Yes.
I think masculine. Maybe I want to say at least humility to confer also. I want to say that, but that may not, humility to confer with more and diverse sources of input, because you don't have all the answers. I don't know whether I'm not taking your bite.
Okay, that's fine. Although the third one I would attribute to the enlightened masculine, not the normal masculine, at the risk of sounding very sexist. But notice that you did not say things like care, love, connection, affection. Those are put as feminine qualities. But the fact is, whatever gender you're born with, you need those things. You need love, care, affection, connection. And in the absence of that, men are suffering as much as women are needing it. So it's a big mess right now. So we have a lot of re-education to do in this area.
Just want to quickly acknowledge Madhulika, and Govind Babu, Chandrasekhar Kasiraju for tuning into the FB Live at some point of time. I'm not sure whether that's currently there, but I'm just acknowledging them. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So your next question, please.
So my entire focus is on the unlearning and the relearning bit, actually. So I want to really, take the key unlearning difficulty either for a man or for a woman in a marriage.
All right. So let me start at the very beginning. See, when you first reached out to me for having this conversation on FB Live, in the context of the series that you were doing about COVID, right? In the times of COVID.
But I have a slightly redefinition of COVID, coping through very intense, difficult times.
Yes.
It's been the pandemic.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
So I would like to first of all put out on the table that COVID at one level is an extremely frightening so-called pandemic that is happening out there and threatening to come closer and closer. That's one way we experience it. But in another way, if you see it, COVID is actually an internal screech halt that has happened, where it is forcing us to look at everything that has been shoved under the carpet, whether the carpet is individual or relational. It doesn't matter. So whatever you have refused to look at, whatever you have postponed to be looked at, whatever you have put away as maybe not now, maybe later, either as an individual or as a couple, it's being put in your face, right in your face. Now you can't escape it. So I have, my practice has gone through the roof in the last 4 months. It was already up at the ceiling. Now it's just gone completely. There are so many organizations which have called me for various series of talks and webinars on relationships. Can you believe that? Would an organization ever discuss anything personal and relationship related? That was
Usually
like,
not.
nah, that's your problem. You deal with it. Yeah. You just come and perform and that's enough, right? So it is really forcing us to look at everything that we have refused to look at. So the carpet is off.
Can I say
All
something
the
right now?
debris under the carpet is coming out.
Yeah, can I say something right here? Because when I went into a learning and development role, I actually got into a group of 50 people who meant to address 100,000 people actually. And 100,000 people's learning and development needs actually. But then every kind of person was there in that group actually. People who came from very persuasive speakers, very talking like very effective presenters actually. So there used to be people who used to always say, "Jo dikhta hai wo bikta hai." You mean they used to like make everything needs to be visible. Then only it will be. They were a little forceful also. At that time, I was good with language. I used to say to myself, "Jo dikhta nahi hai, wahi dikkat hai." I used to say that to myself actually, and I'm more of an inside-out guy. Actually. So, I mean, for me, actually, getting myself effectively speaking was the one problem. But of course, my pen was doing the talking. That's how I was gaining confidence. But जो दिखता नहीं है वही दिक्कत है is something that occurred to me 10 years ago, which is what we are talking about, like things put under the carpet actually.
Yes. So I think you were yes, absolutely. I think you gave yourself a pause and you had the courage to look at what is visible and what is not visible, which is not a common trait, is what I'm saying. So when people say, "Oh, COVID is causing problems," I slightly disagree with that. COVID is not causing problems. It is just surfacing problems that have been pushed away or put under the table, put under the carpet. That's the first, foundation of this conversation, right? And now, when you talk of unlearning, it is again another Pandora's box. So, what do we unlearn in a marriage? What do we unlearn? First of all, we have to look at what do we bring into the marriage, which is learned from our exposure to marital models, which we unconsciously repeat and continue with our own spousal relationships. So let's understand that first, and then there is an opportunity to think about, can this be relearned? Can I drop this and pick up something better? Right? So what do we
Okay.
what are this is my favorite line, right? For the two most important roles in our lives, the role of a spouse and the role of a parent, we do not even have a 5-hour course anywhere in a recognized university, anywhere. Privately, people may be teaching something or the other, that's okay, but it is understood that, because you hit puberty, you will date and have relationships, and then because you hung out long enough with a person, might as well marry, and then now that we are married, might as well have children because the clock is running. These are the reasons we get into a relationship. With what?
Right.
With the training of having witnessed two extreme things. One is mostly dysfunctional marriages, including our own parents and our own family members, our own cousins everywhere, and these extremely idealized movie images where everything stops with the promise of happily ever after. There is not one movie that is made after the marriage is done. The wedding is done. All movies stop at the parents agreeing and these guys saying, okay, we're going to get married, and there's the end of that. So we are stuck between these two completely unhelpful models of what to do in a marriage. And now we get in and all mayhem starts, right? So what do we unlearn here? It is not any one thing. It's a whole way of being. It's like the feeling of putting your hand deep into the sock and pulling it ulta, right? Undoing and unturning the socks, right? It's a lot of work. So while,
I just want to share. I mean, you inspired me so much to actually share. Maybe it's an aberration. I mean, I don't want to call out on everybody, but my father, thankfully, he was raised by a matriarch, that is his grandmother, in a very patriarchal settings, which you many years ago. I mean, I don't want to go into it. I have explained everything in my book, actually. But the point is that it was probably a blessing in disguise, because it was ingrained into him to treat women right. Because my father, for 37 years, he served in a job where he was very busy. And 2000, when he got retired, my mother immediately fell sick, and she got in and my father, he said, it's my second job. He just took good care of her initially on his own, but it was very difficult, and that is they moved in with us, and it was not easy for us actually to go through that. So, but that was what happened actually. My father is consistently a light-hearted person actually, in the sense, I don't know where he learned that. He would constantly he will find a way to rhyme. I mean, put that punch lines, that word play, which actually rubbed on me for the last 15, 16 years. And that's the reason the whole chill is actually an encapsulation of what I observed my father over the last 16 years.
Amazing. That's really amazing. And it is unusual, as you said.
As I said, it is really a patriarchal setting. But just because he lost his mother at the age of 8, and his grandmother was a widow, and she was a child bride. I don't want to go into the details. She was a child bride. Kanyasalkochi ఆవిడ తీసుకొచ్చారు ఆ రోజుల్లో. ఆవిడ హస్బెండ్ మూగాయతను, అంటే it was difficult marriage for her. ఆ హస్బెండ్ మూగతను కాబట్టి ఒక పూర్ ఫ్యామిలీ నుంచి ఆవిడని కొనుక్కొచ్చారు. But that lady, imagine how tough that lady would be, because if she has lived through that kind of situation, she raised him when he lost his mother. So he would have got the whole learning bit would have happened to him, right? Would you agree?
So see, I think there are we have such extraordinary examples which sometimes confound reality. Okay, now it's a beautiful inspirational example you have shared of your own grandmother and father, but for a majority of people, it is equivalent to learning about Shivaji's mother, Jijabai, or Rani Jhansi Lakshmi, or something like that, which feels like a very extreme situation. They can't relate to it.
It does, yeah.
Nowadays, things are very different, right? So what he would have learned, what he would have absorbed from her, we don't know. Part of it, of course, all her qualities of grit and courage and alongside grace of being a woman,
I'll
we
take
must
just
have
one
taken
example.
on.
I'll take one example. My mother never studied beyond fifth class, but my sister is a practicing doctor and settled in US for the last 20 years. My father would fight with my mother. No, she needs to study whatever she needs to study, because my mother was saying, ఒక BA చేసి బీకామ్ చేసి ఒక బ్యాంక్ జాబ్ చేస్తే చాలు కదా, my mother used to say. But my father would say, whatever she wants, she should do.
Right. Right. So yeah. So I think this is a very different kind of a family you're talking about. We're speaking of marital models that are very, very different. So where are we? What's your next question?
So basically, unlearning is like maybe what you'll picked up consciously or unconsciously, and I mean, basically that you need to really unlearn if it is giving you a problem. Is that what you are actually saying? Actually?
Okay.
I mean, is that
So
what
let me go into a little bit of detail about that. So what we learn is this. One is we absorb the way the parents are interacting with each other. That's a constant subliminal conditioning that is going on. On top of that, we also there are some very basic processes that happen to every child. So very early on, if a child is, unattended to, neglected,
is it that will help? How do we learn and how we grow?
Well, it can. Maybe at a little later stage, you can have that on.
Sorry.
Yeah. So in the way they are brought up, if a child is neglected, deprived, or inflicted upon, these are the three ways abuse can happen. Yeah. Neglected, deprived, and inflicted upon, there is a wounding that happens. Wounding, injury, right? So this is called the wounded child. This is usually up to the age of 6 or 8 years. Something of this nature would have happened. So there is either shaming or blaming or attack or neglect or not giving something, or the child is in a very anxious state of non-attachment with the caregiver. Then this child now figures out that I have to do something to survive. So that becomes the adapted child. So this is all the way up to early puberty, early adolescence, so 14, 15, 16 years, from about 8 years of age. The child learns various things of how do you manage this situation. So for example, if you have a raging father, it's better not to tell the truth, is one adaptation. Right? If you have an absent mother, it's better not to reveal your real feelings. That's another adaptation. Right? So like this, the older child starts adapting to the dysfunctional, unhappy situation that they are growing up in. And this is the majority of families. This is not some abnormal families. We're talking about 95 to 98% of families. This is how we are. Because the parents are also brought up by similarly wounded parents. So it transmits from one generation to another, right? Now, on top of this comes the third layer, which is the educated, sophisticated, intelligent, exposed, traveled, well-spoken, articulate adult who takes himself around the world.
Right.
Now, here, if you have that slide, you can show the iceberg.
So I probably, I'm very sorry for putting it up a little prematurely. Now, can you take it through a little bit? Yeah.
No, not this one. Not this one. The other slide, if you have the iceberg slide.
Okay.
Do you have that?
I don't have the iceberg slide. I thought iceberg is.
No problem.
Yeah.
No problem. So what it means is the visible portion of the iceberg is the very contained, calm, composed, adult, working professional. But underneath the surface are these two characters, the wounded child and the adapted child, trying to run the show. So now, if a woman with her own woundings and adaptations and a man with his own woundings and adaptations find each other very attractive, they fall in love, or even if they don't fall in love, if it's an arranged marriage as well, they come together they're not meeting at the level of the tip of the iceberg. They're meeting in the underneath area, right? So now all my adaptive techniques I will throw on you, and all your adapted methodology you will project on me. So for example, I don't mind if you tell me something about coming late from work, but you will lie to me because you're habituated now, because that's your adaptation behavior.
Okay.
And for me, that will be like, oh, I'm never, taken into confidence, and you're pushing me away, you're making me far, far away, things like that. So this until both the partners go back into this and heal this issue, make the wounded child feel safe, make the adapted child feel it is no longer necessary to adopt those behaviors, and to take over charge, to give over charge to the adult, to the grown up adult. Unless this healing work is done individually by each partner,
Okay.
nothing much will change in the marriage.
So
Nothing much will change in the marriage.
without those things happening, will there be a lot of distortions?
Yes, of course. That is why I keep making this rather sad joke of, that's why I have a livelihood.
Pardon me?
That is why people like me have a livelihood, because there are massive distortions going on in every marriage.
సో అంటే తెలుగులో చెప్పాలంటే కొన్ని మనం భూతద్దలను చూస్తాము, కొన్ని పెద్ద ఇష్యూ ఉన్న దాన్ని చాలా చిన్నదిగా చూస్తాం. అంటే బేసిక్ గా in a way it is like I'm just using so that
So let me give you a quick example that will clarify this, right? So because my wounded child is petrified and terrified, my adapted child will be always on hypervigilance, right? So now when you come and say something very simple also, I can feel very attacked, and I have to protect my wounded child, so I will attack you back. And so there you go. When you're talking about perceptual distortion, that is what happens. My ability to see what you're saying for itself, my ability to understand things in the present, is highly colored and contaminated by the past baggage. Absolutely. So unless we are, so therefore it comes my other big punchline, which is conflict it can serve as a catalyst to self-discovery. Relationship conflict can serve as a catalyst to self-discovery, because if you are constantly facing this gut-wrenching pain in a relationship, whether it's a workplace one, or friendship, or marriage, or intimacy, doesn't matter. If that's happening, that means something in you is getting triggered again and again and again, and it's time to go in and check in and see what is happening. And this work can be done as a couple. Ideally, that would be wonderful. It would be so healing and restorative for both partners. But many times men are not even remotely willing to do the work. So it's women who reach out, and when they reach out, maybe 10 or 15 or 20% of men join, but majority of them don't. And if they do, some of them don't continue as well. So women do this work, a lot of things change for them. And then what happens is, because now they are not responding from their maladaptive behaviors, in some way the relationship starts shifting. It gets better. But
something at the foundation level, if it's fixed actually, then obviously it shows better. Something like that?
No. So there's more I was saying. So it gets better, but if fundamentally the adaptation of that individual has fallen away, and she has come into this complete individualized, individuated adult woman who is all of herself, then the adaptation, then the adjustment is not even possible, because now the husband is still stuck in the old child stage. So it's impossible to adapt. So those are the marriages which I call the threshold marriages, where the conflict
both needs to work on the whatever is the issue basically together. So it's something like, it is also something like if there's a difficulty of conceiving children, usually it's very easy for men, like in the sense, maybe it's very the masculine macho when woman jacket test her out. It could always be the man also, right? So something something at that level need to happen at a relationship level.
Yes. Ownership, to see that you are also contributing to the chaos. It's not a one-way street. Yeah. So that's it. So the point, but the point I was making is, while it is ideal that both people go for a restoration, if one goes, usually it is the woman and the husband doesn't go, in some situations that actually breaks the marriage, that doesn't restore the marriage, because now this woman cannot fit into that old mold at all. Yeah.
Right.
And I'm
Right.
not talking about feminism, I'm not talking about
Right.
empowerment. It's not that. It's just about coming to know who you truly are and living in
Right.
integrity with that. That becomes impossible because now you can't relate in the way you used to relate previously.
Right.
Right. So this is what I call threshold marriages. Many a times, with or without therapy, one of the partners, usually the women, they keep working on themselves and they grow to a level where the marriage seems like a burden. It doesn't seem like a possibility at all. So
Right.
that is why I've coined the term threshold marriage, where with consciousness and with ownership and with accountability, things can be restored between the two. And if they cannot, then they can also be gracefully disengaged. You don't have to, create a lot of mess around it. So that's
Yeah.
the
Traditionally, what do you think might have happened in like with very traditionally what are the things that would have happened? You would have like people who have been long married with them. Typically, what would have happened in typical Indian society?
yeah. Oh, not Indian society. This is global. By the way,
Global.
the disease of marriage is universal. It is not Indian.
Okay.
I'm calling it a disease because it has typical symptoms. So here's what I have come to understand. I said this earlier also. Marriage, I think, was designed for a very different purpose. And in the last 50 to years or so, just in the recent years, something else has been imposed on that formula and it is not able to carry it. So what was the original purpose of marriage? You look at it even from the times of Mahabharata. It was territorial expansion, economic acquisition, or political collaboration. These were the three reasons why any marriage would happen.
Okay.
And in the bargain, what is it that you would get? You would get community, you would get support, you would get tribes to be together and be more stronger. And the woman would get a home, a protection, a name, an identity, and a safe assurance of the wellness of her children.
Right.
This was this formula. So the fundamental thing that a man needed to do was to provide and to protect. If you can do these two things, you're good to marry. And
Right.
a woman, if she can have children and look after the family, that was enough. You had to do two things. Where is that now? No woman needs a man to protect or provide to her.
Okay.
No, and the men now don't know what else to do because they have disconnected from their feminine side, from their softer needs, from their ability to relate to people. Connectivity has gone. So that is why
It
we
has
are
gone
having.
over the years. It has gone over the years, and it has got
Oh,
accelerated.
no, I think over the years, as we have, become industrialized and so much change has happened over the years. It has happened, and this is global. This is not just in India. So
Okay.
older marriages, I think, continued and survived because they still work on that model. Today, people are questioning it. They're questioning as to what I want and does this formula provide it to me? If it doesn't, then why do I continue to invest in it? So we're talking, and then of course now there is the other thing of people saying, oh, but we have children so we can't break up. So on that I have a very different perspective, which may be radical or unacceptable to a lot of people, but using the children to justify your choices is the worst thing you can do, is the
Okay.
worst thing you can do, because children, even infants, can sense the emotional psycho-spiritual ambience that is around them in the form of their parents.
Okay.
And you are living a very disconnected or hostile relationship and bringing up the child in that and trying to pretend that it's an unbroken frame, but it is
Right.
not. So I think using children to say that, oh, that's why we are somehow suffering, I think you have to teach children not to suffer, to face truth, to do what it takes, to take help, or to let go. Some adult behavior you'll have to do there. You can't use children to justify your lack of integrity.
It becomes a crutch, maybe. It becomes
It becomes a crutch. Yes.
it
Yes.
becomes something which is
And
unhelpful. Yeah.
yeah. And also it's dangerous later on, you know. So you bring up children who believe that this is the model of what a man and what a woman, what a husband and wife should be. They grow up with that conditioning, number one. Number two, they're not permanently going to be with you. They're going to leave your home today or tomorrow, son or daughter. They're not going to be with you. Then what are you going to do? Now you both are truly stuck. Now you're 20 years older with half the energy that you had when you were younger. And now you're facing each other every day without the reason of the children being in between the two of you. That's a horrifying state to get to. Because you have no clarity of yourself, your identity, your purpose, your goals, nothing at all. So those are the times when people also then reach out with depression or anxiety or physical disorders. Yeah, it's not, doesn't make sense. Yeah.
I know this is a real deep subject. So I'm actually seeing, initially I was thinking only 30 minutes, but it has taken another 10 more minutes. Can we take another 5 minutes just to tell, like, what are all the main main causes which are putting a lot of strain on the marriages? Maybe what kind of category?
Yeah. So don't worry about time. I have kept the evening open, so not an issue.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good as well. I'm good as well because this can be recorded. This is getting recorded and it will, it can by people.
All right. So I think you're asking what are the various reasons people, marriages get into trouble, get into conflict, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I have another statement that I keep making all the time. It doesn't matter what symptom you come with. There are only 4 diagnoses in a marriage. So what that means is you can come fighting about maids or in-laws or too much socialization, too little socialization, alcohol, drug, that doesn't matter what you come with. There are 4 pillars which will make a marriage strong if they are fed and kept properly. And if they are not, then problem in one of them will trigger problems in all the others, right? So the first one is physical compatibility. By this, I'm not only hinting at sexual compatibility, which is an important part of it, very important part of it, but I'm talking about the overall comfort of the couple with each other in terms of physical presence and closeness to each other, from sharing a bathroom to sharing a house to sharing a bed to sharing a sofa to hugging, kissing, hitting, touching, kissing, everything. The physical comfort between 2 people, that's extremely important. And this is a critical leg. I use the 4-legged table model. This is the most important leg.
I do have the image. Whenever you want me to put that image, I can put it actually.
Yeah, sure, you can put it on. Maybe after I finish explaining, because once the image is there, they get
I can put that on.
Yeah. So the second leg would be financial stability. By this, what I mean is not the amount of money that you have in savings or that you have inherited or that you can earn. It is to do with the couple's relationship to money and abundance and security, where they both have had one too many dialogues or conversations or an understanding that we are okay. We are not going to go on the streets. It is okay. So there is a basic sense of security involved. Yeah. So that is finances. That's the second one. The third one has to do with shared values. So this is another thing I want to say in reference to my previous comment also about Bollywood and Hollywood. Bollywood talks about the couple coming together like that and living happily ever after. In reality, they come and then they start crossing like that if they don't have something common to turn to and go towards. So shared values are
generally Pati Patni aur wo wala hota hai. There is a movie called Pati Patni aur wo. That is not the
yes. So it is critical that you take every conflict to examine the values that you are having, which are clashing with each other. So normally this won't show up until the wedding or until the first child. Only then these things actually start cropping up, because you'll have fights about which school to send the child, which family to let them have a sleepover, which car to use, whether to walk, whether to do this. Everything becomes a conflict because there is value clash. There's one partner who is more of the traditional recycle, reuse, reduce kind of an approach. The other one is more a modern Western, let's do it easy if it is possible, let's get on with things approach. So these clashes happen. So these are some daily living values, but there are also deeper values, like your relationship with life, your relationship with the cosmos. Who are you? What do you think of? How do you see yourself in this world? What is your larger picture approach and goal and all of that? So if there is some commonality, they can put their whole energy into that, either supporting each other individually or working together, both at the same time, right? So this is the third leg. The fourth leg is social identity. Now, this is particularly important in this era because both women and men have their own individual professional identities, largely speaking. But does this couple exist as a couple in the social ecosystem of both the personal and the professional networks? Are they invited together? Do they go together? Do they show up together? Do they enjoy company together with each other and with the others who are calling them? Or do they just do their own social show ups separately, individually? Now, this is critical because couples who have a strong social identity tend to take very long to plan divorce, if at all. But
Because
those who don't have this, this is directly visible in the West. There is nothing called social identity for a marriage in the West. So it's very easy to just
more of a
bring
taboo.
them.
Yeah. So I have the image now. I mean, is that visible enough?
Yes, please. It is
So
visible. Maybe.
so basically those are the four legs, right? Once again, quickly recap
Yes.
the people. Yeah.
Yes. So the bottom left is physicality. The top right is finances. Bottom right is shared values. And top left is shared identity, social identity. Now, why I have put them like that, if you can see, there is an infinity loop covering all those four legs. That is to show that not only they're dynamic, but they're also interconnected. One thing feeds the other, one thing also depletes the other.
Right.
Now, here I want to put in a fine print, which is very important. In a normally working, reasonably good marriage, sex occupies just 20% of weightage. It is one of the things that is there in the relationship. But if the other three legs are shaking, if the other three legs are weak, then it impacts this physical compatibility quite strongly. And vice versa. If there is some trouble in the sex department, whether it's a difficulty or a feeling of unfulfillment for whatever reason,
Sure.
then it shakes all the other three legs.
Right.
So it's a very interesting
Yeah. So it
equation.
becomes wobbly for sure. I mean, I think four-leg model, four-leg table model is a beautiful model to actually physically relate to it and then reflect about. Very very nicely said. I mean, basically, when all the four are there, then you won't notice. But when one is missing, and for an extended period of time, that is when actually it starts really missing or what
Yes.
wobbly. Yeah.
No, as you said, wobbly. When it starts getting loose and shaky, if you notice on a table like that, the more burden you put, the more the rest of the table starts shaking, and slowly it can fall down. That
Absolutely.
way.
I think that's a beautiful, beautiful. I won't call it a meat, the meat of what is out there. So I have one quick question. Actually, is it also to do with like we are getting more and more nuclearized families? For example, in my case, we didn't plan to become a joint family, but force of circumstances actually made us like live like a joint family. Now we have done and actually we had to cut a lot of our social circles. Actually, my mother was very sensitive to receive any visitors because she was at a wheelchair. I had only work colleagues. I never had friends. Now, I mean, for many years, and same with my wife. She just had one friend whom she would visit. Because anybody coming in, my mother was like little touchy about it.
Yeah.
Cut that off. But then
Yeah.
maybe we received some other benefits because because of special circumstances. These are very special circumstances. But I want to ask this question: would joint families, well adapted joint families, offer better question?
It is hard for me to answer that because I don't have actual data, but I can make some generalizations there. See, in your case, it's a caregiver adaptation,
Caregiver
because
adaptation,
you were giving care to a disabled person. So that's as you said, it's a special situation. But normally, I feel, given the way things are, the pace of life, and the pursuits that we are involved in, joint families tend to be harder for people to deal with, even with the best of relationships.
Okay.
Yeah. So, is the breaking of the joint family the reason for marriages to fail? I don't think it's that simple. I mean, that I've been trying to explain all the things that have gone into making marriages difficult, right? So I don't think so. So therefore, having a joint family, would that support a marriage? It's hard to say. I think it's very unique. It's very unique to each family, each couple.
We
But
cannot.
I've seen the best adaptations where the nuclear unit and the elderly unit live close by, either top and down or
Right.
walkable distance or something,
Yeah, so
where
they have their
they
own
have
space.
their own space, but they
That's the
also
best.
have closeness, accessibility.
Best of both worlds, basically.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So both worlds are whatever,
Yes,
reasonably good thing of both the worlds.
correct.
That's a great answer. I have actually one question, which is from, if there is a special needs child, would that, because there was a question and there was somebody like who said, okay, special needs
So,
would such
yeah.
needs would be projected onto only one of the parent and not both the parents and all that, right? You understood the question?
So I think, if I understood it right, it was about, does a special needs child put extra pressure on the marriage? I think that was the question.
Right.
Yeah, that was the question.
That was a question
So
because I
again,
was excited about it and shared it in the special needs mom group about this, actually. Yeah, about this talk.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think it's really, I don't know how to say, just a child being born puts pressure on marriage. Never mind a special needs child.
Sorry, you
You
have
know
to repeat that.
because we don't have. No, I said just a normal child being born puts pressure on the marriage. Never mind a special needs child. I mean by that is, previously, before the whole nuclear family situation came about, the pregnant girl would be taken care of by a horde of relatives.
Okay.
And the child would be brought up by a horde of people, including the street, including the neighbors. Yeah. Now it's not like that. So even the birth of a regular child, but the second child, many a times puts a lot on the marital relationship. So definitely a special needs child will tax to the limit. I think it is a very unique situation depending on the particular couple. This can open up doors for very deep personal transformation from the way things are, leading to some amazing possibilities, or it can also break the marriage. So yes, it is a challenge. It is a huge challenge.
For the last minute or two, the network at your end seems to be not so stable. I don't know. At least the way.
Jagan, are you able to hear me?
But there has been a breakage of what you've been saying.
Hello?
Yeah. Are you?
Oh, okay. So where did you lose me?
So I got the essence, which is raising children itself is like a problem by itself. Special needs children even bigger problem. Something like that, right?
Definitely.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I said that, and I also said that, yes, that's correct. And I also said that, therefore, special needs children present a very profound opportunity for the personal growth and transformation of both parents. depending on how they take it.
Yeah, Satya Nadella hit refresh is all about Satya hit
Yes.
refresh. I have the problem when I talk about the book. Somebody says, no, 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 Satya Nadella, I'm already reading, which means, you are nobody for me to read. I mean, that is that is one message I keep getting. But it's okay. I'm just putting because that's a great example of what you're saying. Actually,
Yes.
his child was all about I think both it was both his wife actually. Yeah, sure. I think so. A coin has both sides. It depends on how you adapt to the challenge, right?
Yes.
I think that's a real profound way to actually put this together. But it doesn't mean that everybody is such another material. One needs to. I mean, one may have the intent, but if something
Yeah.
deep down needs to be worked on, you need help, right?
No. So see, please don't assume that Satya Nadella and his wife didn't have help. You read their book and you read the rest of it properly. They have existed and survived because of their special needs parents community constantly. The
Okay.
doctors, the psychologists, and the other parents. So in
Okay.
fact, she goes to the extent of saying that they became family. The parents with the same issues, the other couples and families having such challenges. So, just as it is not easy to raise a child without support, it is impossible to raise a child with special needs without support.
Great. I think great.
You
That's a great.
must have support. So reaching out and collecting support is probably the most resourceful thing you can do.
So yeah, so doesn't need to have a special need child problem. Whatever one is going through, always helps to increase your resourcefulness. Rather than assuming that you have it all within. I think that's a great way. Actually, I didn't read the hit refresh myself. Actually, I only know what it's about.
Okay.
That's why I was making that it's a great statement. Which I'm thankful that you have corrected me on that.
No, and I'd like to reiterate one more thing here. It doesn't matter what the issue is and who the person is. If you read any of the successful people's stories and biographies, all of them have reached out for help and taken help without hesitation, without shame, without any apology. They have been very open in stating what their need and requirement is. They have been very humble in asking for help. They have been very courageous in taking the help and working forward. So the more you try to deny the problem and say, no, I can manage, the farther you will be from success. The sooner you say, everyone has challenges, it's okay, I have this challenge, mine is this, that one is that one is that. Each one of us has one different basket. So the sooner you claim what the issue is, the faster you will come out of it. So asking for help is, I think, a high act of courage. It's an act of courage, yes.
It's an act of courage, yeah. Okay, so that's masculine. Is that masculine? I mean, coming back to the first question, is that a masculine thing or is it asking for help?
You tell me. You should answer that now. You should answer that.
That's the reason why I said the third thing is about leaning in from multiple people, which I have now been doing for more than 15 years. I mean, the kind of circumstances I've been put in, I was always finding myself, pick and choose. I can do cherry picking actually. A lot of cherry picking I could do actually.
Yes. So I want to say one thing in this context, since you referenced it back. I think men can begin by being more authentic about their silent suffering and speaking out, at least to other men, and then realizing that they're not alone in that pain.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and realizing that they're not alone in that pain and it's universal, and that something can be done about it. They don't have to swallow it and keep up that strong front, because at the end of the day they are also made of flesh and blood.
Yeah.
So the women, I think, have more tenacity. I was saying that women have more tenacity and inner strength because they reach out and connect and garner support internally by expressing what's going on. So I think if men can also begin to be okay to talk about these things. See, men are comfortable to talk about other things, sports and politics and games and money and this and that, but not about themselves. Women are bindas. They talk about themselves all the time. So which is why they can tolerate stress a lot better. You know? So that would be the parting statement.
One line from my side is, when you are in denial, there is an automatic renewal that is happening actually about your mind. I mean, that's what my one line reflection would be. There is a.
Could you repeat that?
Huh? When you are in denial of something, there is a silent renewal of. There is silent strengthening of whatever is actually holding you back. You just the more you come to terms with what is actually you need to come to terms with, you find resources to deal with it actually.
Correct. Very true. Very true. Yes.
So I'm just saying it because I am a man, and probably saying this probably can affect somebody else to actually think about.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Right.
Sujata,
so is there anything else?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the clock. Almost an hour of time went about, which almost like double the time which I thought, But it's such a deep topic. I'm so glad that any parting words on this, and then we'll call it a day.
I think I would only like to, first of all, thank you for having me. This was a pleasure. Being able to talk about all these things. This is something very, very close to my heart because I'm seeing that in our denial and in our refusal to look at what's going on, we are harming the next generation because we raise the children with the same of. So as parents, I think it's important that we look inwards, and if we can't figure out what is inside, take help appropriately and be committed to cleaning up is important. So in that way, COVID has forced us to look at things. So let us not fritter away this opportunity. Let us not count the days to going back to how it was, where you can just walk away or run away from all these issues. Let's thank the extraordinary situation we are in and put it to good use. Use the time to really look inwards, spend more time with family, do all of those things. That's what I would like to leave with.
Yeah, that's good parting words, Sujata. Although there was a little bit of a technical glitches actually, in the sense the voice didn't come through as quickly. I mean, as clearly, but that's fine. So you are saying make use of this opportunity rather than wondering about when will you want to go back to business as usual. It is not business as usual. You address what matters, right?
Yes.
Sujata, thank you once again. Thanks a lot for your time. Are you able to be with me?
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm just ending.
Yeah.
Shall I end the FB Live?
Yes. Thank you. It was lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.